So welcome everybody to this Soil for Water webinar. We've been working with Soil for Water for a while now, and particularly on this project through our grant funder, Southern SARE. We're kind of looking at some of the barriers to adopting regenerative agriculture or regenerative grazing specifically. And grazing done properly is one of those things that can benefit soil health. And those soil health principles tend to lean towards capturing, holding more water and using it more efficiently in our soils. And so most importantly, though, we believe that the best learning environments are from peer to peer, neighbor to neighbor, producer to producer. That's where y'all tend to learn the most from each other. And so we started this series where we've been working with the producers that are in the project and giving them a little bit of a spotlight to just tell everybody about themselves, show a snapshot of their operation, and then give time to ask questions. And so today we're going to meet the wonderful Servando Leal. He is in South Texas, in Bruni, Texas. Like I said, on those barriers to adoption, Servando got over some of those barriers, and he will tell you more than me that he did it just because it was the right thing to do and to be a good steward of the land. And so I will stay on. I'll be putting a few things in the chat. Go ahead and feel free to ask questions in the chat as well. If we don't answer them live, we will have a Q&A session at the end. I'll be here just in case you need anything, and I'll hand it over to Servando now. Let me share my screen, Servando.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. As Darren said, my name is Servando Leal, and we ranch in east of Laredo. We're in Webb and Duval County, as well as Jim Hogg County and Hebronville. And we're very blessed that I'm 5th generation ranching on my dad's side of the family and 8th generation on my mother's side of the family. And obviously, we've learned a lot through our ancestors and tradition and what have you. But we've also learned, or I've learned that, we also had to kind of open our minds to new ways of doing things, or different ways of doing things, and perhaps approaching things in order to be more sustainable and profitable at the end of the day. And like Darren said, and it's very true to me, or for me, is, I take the responsibility and the stewardship of both properties with a lot of respect and responsibility as to what my duties are in regards to the sacrifice that our ancestors made to give us today this opportunity, as well as my responsibility in producing a healthier product. In our case, it's grass-fed natural beef to our consumer, direct to the consumer. So that I'm very passionate about that, and that's what drives me in continuing to figure out how we can continue to be better stewards. Now, I'm going to take you as far back as, not to when I had hair, because obviously I've lost a lot of it, but I'm going to take you as far back as 1900, because that's when both my grandmothers were born. And as a child, I remember both of them would tell me or make reference to, when we'd be out on the ranches, both grandmothers would say, when they were children, it was really open country. It was, believe it or not, prairie land, which is hard to believe looking at South Texas nowadays. And they said, we used to name the trees because they were few and far apart. But if you go back and look at one of the other slides that Darren's got coming up, or I don't know if I have access to do that. That's a prime picture. If you zoom in on the upper left and the bottom right corner, I mean, we've got a wall of South Texas brush that is hard for animals, to both wildlife and cattle, to get through there and navigate and get the nourishment and the forbs and grasses and browse and everything that they need. So back in 2013, well, it was even before 2013, trying to figure out how can we jumpstart this? How can we get it off the ground again and be more productive? Because the reality of looking at those two upper and lower pictures, I mean, we've got acreage, thank God, on paper, but it's non-grazable, or we're just not producing enough grazable forage in the midst of that South Texas brush. So, we had applied years back prior to 2013 for a lot of these natural resource conservation EQIP programs, and went through all the processes and what have you. And, we would get some cordial letters that we got denied, and if we wanted to contest it, and so on and so forth. And, that was discouraging. But nevertheless, we kept on. We said, our day will come someday. And that day did come in 2013 was when we got our first NRCS EQIP contract. And it was for brush management, which involved stacking, raking, and root plowing. And at that time, before we even went to that process, or when we were at that process, actually, we went as far back as, we did extensive research on NRCS maps of our property. We looked at the different soil types, and I think Darren's got some pictures of that as well, to figure out what kind of soils we had. And in one property in particular, we've got 4 different soil types, but they all have one common denominator, which is we've got a lot of rock on the surface. So our brush is low, but it is thick and dense. And nevertheless, we just have a hard pan of rock, 4 or 6 inches into it, you're already hitting a hard pan of caliche rock or gravel or what have you. So looking at those soil maps, we then said, okay, let's walk in the brush and let's see what's happening in there or struggling. And we saw a lot of different native grasses that existed in that canopy of brush. And that's what led me at that time to say, you know what, I want to plant native grasses. And the main reason was, honestly, I was wanting to trade deer hunters because I was just getting frustrated with deer hunters and their complaints about everything. And, we tried to help them with the management, and they talked the good talk when they got on the lease and we interviewed them. But then once they were there, they weren't walking the walk. And I was getting frustrated with that. And yet hearing them complain about things that, well, they could have been doing differently, but chose not to. So I was wanting to trade deer hunters for bird hunters. And that's why I chose native grasses. We planted about 4 different species, plains bristlegrass, green sprangletop, side oats grama, and a little bit of Arizona cottontop. But the predominant one was the plains bristlegrass and green sprangletop. And we did well for about 7 years. I loved seeing the natives and the birds that it attracted, the dove and what have you, and the quail. And it seemed like we were always green throughout the year. When one grass would lose steam or several would lose steam, something else was getting green. So that was always kind of exciting to, even in the toughest of times, that there was a tinge of green on our ground cover. But nevertheless, knowing that the native grasses are more temperamental, they're harder to manage, they don't produce as much forage as other grasses and what have you. They kind of started losing steam, after consecutive droughts. And we continued to do more brush management throughout the years. And that's when we said, okay, or that's when I said, I'm going to plant some buffalo grass because we know it produces more pounds per acre for livestock. And I'm going to let the natives do what they're going to do within the midst of the South Texas canopy of brush. And it was not disturbed as much because obviously the cattle were grazing more in the convenient open root plowed areas that we had done. The other thing that we had to do for infrastructure other than brush management, on one property we got 600 acres, and the only water lot we had was at the cattle pens, and that was in the remote north side of the pasture, northwest, for the whole 600 acres. So we then started looking at, okay, we're going to need some water line distribution, and we're going to need some cross fencing. We only had one cross fence on 600 acres, and that was about 180 acre pasture that we would normally use traditionally for weaning our calves, and everything else was year-round rotation, or year-round grazing rather, with no rotation. So we applied for other EQIP programs, and that's when we got a concrete storage facility approved that holds about 30,000 gallons of water or so. And that's gravity fed. And we started piping, we started trenching and doing water lines for extensive pastures through those cross fences that we had also been approved on. So we've done miles of waterline distribution, miles of cross fencing. What started off as 2 pastures, we now have 14 pastures that we work with, and then I've got about 2 other smaller ones that I kind of use for my own little game of research and development to see what else I can do different. Like, I'll give you an example. Experimenting with electric cross fencing and seeing how the animals behave to it, seeing what the reaction time is through that type of grazing system. So I use those smaller pastures for that, but our average pasture size varies from about, I guess our average is maybe about 50 acres or so, but it's anywhere from 20 acres to 50 to 135. It really varies quite a bit. But we still have quite a bit of ungrazable acres that we would like to continue to try to improve. And, keep in mind, we started all these programs in 2013 between the brush management, the waterline distribution, and the cross fencing. And I've been very fortunate and blessed to, have such a wonderful working relationship with the different people that have been at the NRCS office in Laredo, as well as Hebbronville, and then through other agencies like NCAT, the South Texas GLC, and that's really allowed me a wonderful opportunity to learn and grow from others, and that's why I'm very big on, if we can help someone else or be a poster child, so to speak, to show what sometimes us small guys can do. And I say small guys because a lot of times we feel like we can't compete with a 20,000 acre ranch or 10,000 or even 3,000 or whatever. And that's true perhaps to some degree. However, the reality of it is, in my mind, is there's more of us small acreage guys than the bigger guys, and the smaller guys collectively make up the vast majority of our region or areas that we may live in. But regardless of size or acreage, the most important thing that I think we need to take away and learn from it, or be driven by, is the fact that we can make a difference on how we change our landscape, how the function of our landscape begins to change as we pay better attention to it and we get more invested in it. One of the things we need to invest in more, and I only speak of myself, right, is we need to learn how to have more patience. And we're a microwave society. We want everything instantaneously. And, when we're up against Mother Nature and we're up against droughts and what have you, it's hard to develop that patience. But if we do, we will see how nature responds. I mean, nature is it's such a fascinating system when we start paying better attention to it. And it's taught me so much of how the water cycle works, the air cycle, the forage production, and what have you. So I don't think I could have learned that anywhere else other than on our own property, because everybody's properties are different, obviously, because of soil types, climate, rainfall, lack of, or what have you. So, all these changes that we've made throughout the years, the better utilization of grazing through cross fencing and water distribution has been amazing. Our cattle will graze at different hours. They kind of work like in shift work, much like a factory worker would. Some are lounging and loafing. Others are grazing at, believe it or not, even at 2-3 o'clock in the afternoon when it's 100 degrees or what have you. But they don't have a problem doing that because they know water is readily available. It's close by. They've got plenty of stuff to forage on. And then, of course, rotating for me is not a challenge. I just literally use a cowbell, and I'll ring that cowbell and holler at them, and they're already coming to the gate where I'm at. They know that they're going to a better pasture with fresh grass and time to let where they were at rest for a while and recover in hopes of a rain event. And that's how we do our rotation. And even our rotation, nothing is set in stone. I may have a preliminary yearly map of how I would like to rotate. However, it's subject to change, because of weather conditions or lack of rainfall, or a lot of times just making observations. And I'll give you an example, especially in the wintertime. We get the winter weeds and what have you. I may be in a particular pasture and I may see my cows, and we have grass, but I may notice that my cows are eating a particular weed for some reason that they're just liking. And if I go back and reflect that on the rest of the property during that time of the year, I may remember, okay, well, I've got more of that same weed in another pasture. And because I know it's only temporary, it's seasonal, I'll move my rotation schedule and I'll move them to that pasture where I've got more of that weed that I'm seeing them eating, and take advantage of that while I've got it. Type of a situation is what I kind of try to implement as I notice things through observation. And that's why observation is very key and important in helping us help nature and understand what nature is trying to tell us, and what it's doing on our individual properties. Um, it's also very interesting to see the animal behavior. A lot of times I've seen them, even whether there's weeds or abundance of grass, there's times I won't see them in these open strips, and I'm wondering why. Well, I'll start kind of following a trail or seeing where their most fresh recent cow patties are, and I'll find them in the brush. And sometimes they're eating raw cactus without us even burning pear, because I haven't burned cactus in about 20 years at this point. But that's nature's telling them that they need that something in that cactus, that fiber or whatever it is. And sometimes they'll eat it without us even burning the needles off of it. So once again, it's that observation that's very key. And I'm not trying to interrupt or disrupt nature. I'm just trying to learn from it. And because of that, it's allowed us so many wonderful opportunities to see the property thrive and flourish. Even during drought times, we have not, and I repeat, we have not fed anything. No supplement, no mineral, no hay, nothing, zero, since 2013 when we started these equip programs. And when we did it, it was all about, the first learning curve was, what's this cross fencing and water distribution and brush management going to do on our properties? And but I decided I needed to kind of treat our cattle like a drug addict and get them off of everything. And we did, not knowing if it was going to be a train wreck or not. But to my surprise, and I was very, very big before that, on back up the hay trader, go pick up these supplement feeds from our local feed dealer and what have you. And now we're keeping money in our pocket versus putting money in the guy we used to buy hay from. Because when I used to buy hay, he knew when to call me. I didn't even have to call him. I mean, he already knew my schedule better than I did. And it got to a point, my realization was, I'm putting money in the wrong pocket, first of all. And the other is, I'm basically working for him, because he's seeing my money and it's just going out of my pocket. So I really had to take a different approach on how we ran the property and why we wanted to run it differently and what we were expecting from those changes as well. We've hence, not only done the natives, but now I'm a lot stronger now on buffalo grass, because that is a very strong introduced grass in South Texas. It produces volumes of forage when conditions are right. And we did, I guess, a couple of years ago through South Texas GLC, I had asked, I made the request with Pepe Martinez, who works with our NRCS office in Kingsville, as well as he's our coordinator for South Texas GLC. And I asked Pepe, I said, Pepe, would you be okay in entertaining what I'm wanting to do, which is, let's do some small half-acre plots or whatever you recommend or suggest. And we had just done about 138 acres of root plow on the other family property in Jim Hawk County. And I said, and I want to do some different type of scenarios, and let's see what we learn from it, and let's see what we can share with others and with the NRCS offices throughout the state. He said, absolutely. So we did several plots, and one of them, for example, was just the blading, the brush off. Another one was root plow. Another practice was roam disc once. Another one was roam disc twice. Another one was root plow and roam disc. And anyway, we did multiple like that, and we did identical ones, one with seed, throwing seed behind it, and the other one's identical practices, not throwing any seed at all. And for about 3 or 4 years, we went twice a year and we would do forage counts. And we were looking at two things. We were looking at what's coming back, whether we planted it through seed or not. what is our brush encroachment factor looking like on those practices, and how much forage are we producing in those areas. And Pepe did a wonderful study that he got recognized for, and we've shared since then with other agencies. And the reason we did that was not only to see what nature was going to do in our land, but also trying to figure out what was more feasibly, economically feasible as a practice mechanically. Was it root plow, or was it just disking, or what? Because and then now it's even more evident with the price of everything that's gone up, but from diesel to equipment to parts, repairs, and what have you. So it was very interesting what he came up with on that study, and that now has led me. We've done a lot of mechanical stuff on our property. And and we even have we own our own bulldozer, and we have our own little bulldozer business that we do a lot of land reclamation for producers that have NRCS equipped contracts or programs with. But even then, having my own equipment, it's starting to become somewhat of a financial struggle, even on our own property with our own equipment. And I've been entertaining, and I've seen a lot of other properties through other events that I've been a part of on the chemical side of things. However, chemical has always really scared the heck out of me for different reasons. And anyway, I've done a lot of research. I've talked to a lot of different chemical people, other producers. I mean, this has been going on for at least 4 or 5 years on my part. Well, here most recently, upon research and what have you, I have chosen, and the family has chosen, we're going to go with a product called Spike 20P, and it comes in a granular form. Because keep in mind, what we're wanting to continue to do is open up our canopy, allow nature to do what it's doing, but have the opportunity to do that. But with that South Texas brush, if we do nothing, we're going to be behind the 8 ball consistently. So we got approved, and I'm still working on the logistics of actually getting it done at this point. But we're going to use Spike 20P. It's a granular form. It's about broadcast by about 10 pounds per acre. And the idea is to wipe out a lot of our canopy so that sunlight can come back in, so that the animals can have better access and visibility to get through there. And then see what happens with the forbs, the native grasses in those areas and what have you, because there we're not going to throw any buffalo seed or anything. So, but giving even the natural native grasses a better understanding or better footing and a better opportunity for them to hopefully thrive, because they'll be able to get sunlight that they can't get. The moisture that we do get will not be competed with the root system of the different species of black brush that we have and what have you. So I'm finally excited about going in that direction, and I'm finally not only excited, but I'm most importantly more at peace and comfortable with the decision that we've chosen in going in that direction to continue to have our property thrive for both wildlife, cattle, and just thrive in every aspect in the ecosystem. We're also working on some more additional cross fencing on the other property, the one that I mentioned outside of Hebbronville in Jim-Hawk County. That one I only currently have 2 pastures on 350 acres, pretty much split down the middle. So we'll be working on 6 pastures on the back half. We're going to end up creating a paddocks of about 27 acres or so, plus a lane in the middle so they can go to a mutual common area for water. We got wonderful grass out there. The thing that bothers me there is that the cattle are not utilizing it properly because it's so big. I need to cut it down to size so that we can better have the cattle utilize each paddock, give it the rest, produce the litter that we need to see on the ground in smaller paddocks, and all the benefits that come from that. And with that being said, on the litter and everything else, we had an opportunity, a wonderful opportunity through NCAT, and Darren was a big part of it, as well as Peggy. But Darren was out there with us out in the field twice at least on that property. And we did what's called a safe to fail trial. And the whole premise or concept behind it was, I guess the best example I can give, it's like trying to get a rubber band and seeing how far you can stretch it without it busting on you or tearing or snapping. And what we ended up doing was we did a 30-foot by 30-foot little pen, a trapped area. And we put about 29 live animals, average weight of about 1,200 pounds for 2 hours in there. And we monitored this for every hour, wanting to see. We kind of looked at what we had before we put the cows in there. We went every hour to go see what was happening and how far we were beating that down with those animals in there. After 2 hours, we decided, okay, we pretty much beat it down to where we needed to. Now let's see what happens because we had to let this 30 by 30-foot pen rest for a year and see what it would do with the intense cattle presence, all the activity of their urine, their poop, saliva on the plants as they were tugging the grass, the hoof action, all those factors, right? We were using cattle as a tool, a very aggressive tool, in that 30-foot by 30-foot little trap area. The results were phenomenal. After a year, we went back a little bit after the year anniversary in May. We went back, I think it was in June or early July, if I'm not mistaken. Darren and Pepe joined us. They took a forage count. We wanted to see the dynamics. How did they change? Do we have some new species in here that we didn't have before? Or did we go backwards? That was the whole purpose of the safe to fail trial, is do it on a small scale. If we lose anything and it doesn't work out, it's no big loss. But what can we learn from it? Well, we learned several things. The dynamics of the different species really didn't change, with the exception, I think, of old man's beard present in there that we didn't have before. But the forage production increase was, and I'm trying to see if I can make this screen larger, the one that Sharon's got. The bare ground portion of it, we decreased that by 5% from a year before when we first went in there. Our litter increased by 10% from a year ago. And then the two that really, grabbed my attention, and that's what we were wanting to see, was some kind of difference in these two areas. And it was, we produced about 858 pounds of forage per acre in that year's time after that intense pressure with those 29 animals. And then we also looked at the fact that we were able, on our water infiltration test, we were able to increase that by 4 times greater than when we started a year ago at the beginning. And, I've always said for many years now, I'm trying to do more with less. And sometimes people will tell me, what do you mean by that? I said, well, with the first thing that we all have to contend with, I said, which is rainfall. I said, and because we're in South Texas, arid country, I said, I want just as much rainfall as the next guy, right? Without a doubt. However, the reality of it is we don't always get what we want in that area. And because of that, I'm trying to figure out or learn, how can I achieve more forage and more sustainability for a longer period of time in drought areas or times with the least amount of rainfall. And we are realizing that. We are seeing it. We have been seeing it for several years. But this test really just blew my mind when Darren said, the reality of it is, what the numbers are showing is, you can get a 20-inch rain in an hour and you would capture it all and not get any runoff. Chances are probably not going to get a 20-inch rain to begin with, but nevertheless, the value of capturing the moisture, whether it be a lot or a little, but knowing that we're getting it where we need it, which is in that root system, in the soil, that was just mind-blowing for me. And that's something that's now driving me more towards, like, what other logistical infrastructure do I need to create other than what we already currently have in order to utilize the cattle more as a beneficial tool? Because at the end of the day, they are the greatest benefactor, the animals themselves, and of course us as humans and what we consume. But on the land itself, using the animals themselves, because the ultimate benefit and the goal is to achieve is they're going to benefit from it, from our wildlife to our cattle. And the whole ecosystem is going to function better and will be healthier, especially in times of drought or hard freezes or what have you. And, we've been through all those things. And like I mentioned earlier, we do not feed anything. We have had enough forage on reserve. That's kind of like our savings account. That has been our reserve to keep us going until we get the next rain event. And, sometimes like anything else, you have to take out from your savings and you say, okay, well, I'm going to try to put it back. And well, we put back if we get rain and through good management practices. But if we're not getting those rains and we keep going back to try to get whatever grass we left behind and it hasn't rained and grown, that little savings account of grass keeps diminishing, unfortunately. So, we too have had to destock our numbers on cattle. And we do that for two reasons, primarily. Is one, and probably more than two, but the primary one is to continue keeping the land and the soil and the grasses healthy, keep our animals healthy, and make sure that it doesn't affect our reproductive percentages in a negative way. And nature's kind of forcing us to keep the cream of the crop, so to speak, on the genetics aspect of it, the function side of it, the efficiency side of the cattle, and all those things. So it's a lot of things come into play or have come into play as I've learned a lot of these things. And it's been not only an interesting and fascinating journey, but it's been a very welcoming one, because I was my biggest enemy sometimes. And then it was my way of thinking or my approach. I was kind of like that South Texas brush, thick, dense, wasn't allowing the new, innovative, creative ways, or even trying to think outside the box and saying, well, what can we do to jumpstart and kickstart our property again, and have it start functioning the way nature intended for it to be done. But it's been a wonderful journey that we've taken, and of course we look at everything from the soil to the plant health to the animal health, the gut feel on the side of the cow, how they're digesting and breaking down their grasses in their poop, looking at the dung beetles population and things like that. We've been involved a lot with the Texas A&M University in Kingsville. We've allowed their students that are doing wildlife research and other things to go out there with a drone and do studies. And that in turn gives me some information that they share with me as well for forbs and browse and habitat for our quail and our white-tailed deer and what have you. So we're just trying to anything and everything that goes or lives on our property, whether we like them or not. And the reason I say like them or not is feral hogs has become a very big issue in South Texas and continues to be a big issue, irregardless whether I like them or don't like them, or they've gotten out of hand number wise or what have you. We're just trying to make our property more inviting and conducive to the better health of all those animals that coexist, from the birds to the hogs to the deer and the quail and road runners and what have you, and our livestock, most importantly, and just trying to keep a balance and trying to get a harmony going that we can keep everybody comfortable and not go in the wrong direction that we're later going to either regret or realize we're doing something wrong here. So my approach now in ranching has been for several years now. I used to look at everything as trial and error, and there's nothing wrong with that. However, in my mind, the way I'm kind of wired, I said, well, wait a minute, I'm looking at the error already, and that's kind of a negative thing. So I had to change my mindset, and I now try to do everything under the train of thought or the approach rather of R&D, research and development. And much like this chemical issue that I spoke about, I did a lot of research. I slept on it for several years and talked to different people and went to different places and did a lot of reading and what have you. But now I feel comfortable with pulling the trigger moving forward on this project, because I'm now anticipating and shooting for a bigger goal, which is not the error, but the development side of it. And that's the exciting part for me. But and we're trying to use everything as a tool, from like I mentioned earlier, the cows, the cross fencing, water line distribution, all those things that sometimes we think, well, it won't add up to much, or, well, it adds up a lot in the expense side of things. But that's where these wonderful programs that exist, like EQIP, are very helpful. And they're not meant to pay everything, but it's a substantial help versus trying to pay it all out of your own pocket. And that's why I'm just a big advocate for these programs and people that try to apply, or at least be patient about it. but we've also used the animals and the water line and all those things as instruments or tools to help us, as well as you can see on the screen currently. On this particular property, we did all the brush management side of it, the root plow, the stacking, raking, we seeded it. This one we did seed from the beginning with buffalo grass because I had already learned what I had learned at the other property with the natives. And I let it go for about 6 years. Didn't have any cattle present. Just we were. This is where we were doing the forage counts twice a year. We did those other plots within the property that aren't reflected on these pictures. But before I chose to put cattle on there, I still had to work with infrastructure on the water, which that we did on our own. And then I didn't have any cattle pens or anything, so we had to invest in cattle pen facilities and what have you. Because I didn't want to just throw cattle out there without pens, and I know what was going to happen in time. Their demeanor, their attitude, they were just going to get a little bit waspy on me, and I don't like animals that are waspy or nervous or flee. So I had to create a pen facility in the water so that they know how to come in every day. When I show up, they're not trying to run from me or anything, and that worked out great. But anyway, it took us a while to get to that point. But before I decided to put cattle in there, after I had rested for about 6 years after we did these improvements, I felt that, we had grass. It was obvious. However, I said, but it's been inactive for 6 years, or the latter part of those 6 years. The conditions were right. The timing was right. And I chose to do a prescribed burn on that grass to kind of kickstart it again, reintroduce some nutrients before I put cattle on there, and kind of not work with putting cattle on there for the first time on stale grass or inactive grass. I mean, for me, the grass has a story of its own, and that's its life cycle. It grows when it rains. It grows, throws a seed head. It throws that seed for future grass plants, and then at some point you graze it, and as they're being grazed, the saliva from the cow's animal that's tugging on that grass is stimulating that grass. That tugging action, the hoof action, all those things come into play. But because we hadn't done that for 6 years, I said, I need to kind of reinvigorate this grass again. This is why we did it. So we did that prescribed burn, and we had some moisture after that, and then it took off. And on this property, I was out there, I think it was probably about a month and a half ago or two at this point. And we've had cattle on there for 2 years now, on those 2 pastures. Like I said, that pasture is only cut into 2 right now, but we'll be cutting the back half into 6 paddocks. But we've been there for 2 years. I'm running on average right now on that particular property about 7 acres per head on that forage. We did forage counts with cattle present, and I'll give you an example. We went in April. I had them on the back pasture for 90 days till July. I threw them in the front pasture in July. We went back after that about a month later on that back pasture where the cows had just come off of, about 30 days after that. And we were producing, and of course we've had rainfalls without a doubt. We were producing on an average about 7,000 to 8,000 pounds of forage per acre of buffalo grass. So the carrying capacity obviously has increased, but this is why I'm seeing the importance and the need, most importantly, the need of additional cross fencing so that we can better utilize the property, leave a good amount of litter behind, and just have our cattle. I'd like to use this expression a lot too. A lot of times people will invest in a aerator to pull behind a tractor and all that, and those are good practices. Don't get me wrong. However, I look at my cattle, and then that's why I want smaller paddocks. My cattle are my best aerators because they're not dripping hydraulic fluid or diesel with the tractor that's pulling or anything like that. Or what they're dropping is poop and pee, and that's those are good things to drop in the ground. So they're more efficient. They're more energy green efficient and friendly. And we're able to aerate the soil. The cattle are massaging the soil for us. And then as we move them to another pasture, we continue to do that process. But I like to look at the animals as they're massaging the soil. And who doesn't like a good massage? So that's kind of how I approach and look at that aspect of it. But any questions or any comments or anything? I don't know how we're doing time, but.
Yeah, we're doing good, Servando. Thanks. So,
Okay.
we do have a few questions. Let me get my slides up to date here. So one, Servando is always very helpful, and he wants to talk to anybody. He makes that clear at everywhere he goes. I've seen him talk to so many people, and he wants you to talk to him. So if you don't get any of your questions answered today, there is his email address and his phone number. That is his cell phone number. He wants you to call him, so he will talk to you about anything. But yeah, we do have a few questions already in the chat. Marcia, who the Texas State alumni with me, Eat 'em Up Cats. She has 3 or 4 different questions, and I'm actually going to go in reverse order to kind of talk about it. So she asked about the which agency or program do you recommend equip? So, I guess if you want to talk a little bit about that, like what program, who you partnered with, how you started that conversation of getting into equip, how did that all
Okay.
work for you?
Okay, like I said, initially at the very beginning, we had gotten a couple of cordial letters of denial and what have you, and that was discouraging. But if anybody decides that they want to go down this avenue of, and that's what these programs are structured for, is to help landowners, better utilize and manage and be stewards of their properties. Right? They offer anywhere from building stock tanks to cross fencing to water line distribution, water storage facilities, brush management, erosion. I mean, they've got an array of different things that they address. The first part, and this is where unfortunately a lot of people get discouraged, and it's sad and shameful. We have to go through what's called the Farm Service Agency, FSA, and normally they're housed in the same building, and they did that out of convenience to the people that are applying for these programs. So you first go to your FSA building, an agent. If you own the property, they're going to want to know, that you own it, deeds, all those things. If you don't own it, that's fine. If you're leasing, you can still apply, even as a tenant on somebody's property that you're leasing from. You can still apply for these programs. Now, of course, the key trick there would be as a tenant leasing from somebody else, and if you're applying for these programs, you want to pretty much guarantee yourself with your landowner that he's going to give you a lengthier contract term, because it's going to take a while to see some of these improvements, and then you're going to be out of pocket maybe some money, because like I said, these programs aren't meant to cover everything. Or maybe you can work up a deal, what you and the landowner split the difference on out of pocket stuff that the program doesn't cover. There's different ways to approach that. And then after you get your what's called a farm and tract number on that property, whether it's owned or leased, then you go next door or relatively next door, close by, to the Natural Resource Conservation Office, NRCS. And that's when you start dealing with their agents there in the office, and you can look at the soil maps like we did. They'll look at your property on their computer system, and then they'll go out to your property and you kind of figure out, what are my resource concerns, what they call resource concerns. Is it, I don't have enough grass, or I don't have enough water, or I need to drill a water well, or I need to build a tank, and is my soil suitable for holding water? All those things on the technical advice is free. They'll go out there as many times as they need to help you address whatever concerns you have. And as you all address those concerns, then that's where you can start looking at those EQIP grant programs that they offer and apply for that. Because at that point, then you're pretty much, everybody is applying for different resource concerns. It's names and contracts are dropped in the system in a hat, so to speak. And then it generates what it generates through the system based on the resource concerns and how they ranked. And then it goes from there. But they're very wonderful programs. All the agents that I've dealt with have been extremely helpful, and it just kind of adds a new dimension of how we look at our own properties, and then the goal and the ambition of what we're wanting to achieve on our properties and what we're wanting to address.
Yeah, and Servando, I have a picture of all the partners and you working with them up on the screen right now. You said you had a few denials through equip first, but really you wouldn't accept no for an answer, and you got more and more involved, and you're a part of the Soil and Water Conservation District down there. You partner with your Grazing Lands Coalition in that area. You work with Pepe a lot through NRCS and his grazing specialists. really you opened up conversations, which opened up doors for you, right?
Absolutely. Started off a producer that was denied, and then a producer that was accepted, and then of course working and then making sure when it wasn't about just getting the money and trying to get that resource concern addressed. I mean, that's the primary thing, right? But then it becomes an issue of I need to make sure that I learn and do as much as I can to make sure that I guarantee the success and the longevity of these programs. We're not just trying to be a one-trick pony. And because of that involvement and that way of thinking, has allowed me wonderful opportunities, much like this one, to be interviewed and to deal with Darren and Peggy and Luz and others through NCAT, board member on the South Texas GLC board, our soil and water conservation in Laredo, and then other speaking events that we've been invited and asked to be a part of. It's now being able to share our story, but it's not just our story. It's a story that the good Lord has taught us, that continues to teach us. And now we just want to, like I said earlier, we're small relative to some of these bigger outfits in our area. But we're doing big things on small properties, and that's the big thing for me is we're small, but we're doing huge things, and we're making progress in the right direction, and hopefully giving some inspiration to other small people like us.
Thanks, Servando. And Marcia also asked, like when you talked about doing your seeding with those natives, and then you went into buffalo grass, did you do that with or without irrigation?
No, not all this is non-irrigated. I mean, we don't have any irrigation system at all.
And so her last question is, how long did it take you for you to see results? So like once you said, this is what I'm going to do, this is what I'm going to try, let's start it. How long did you see, how long did it take you to see results, and how long was it for you to able to sustain your herd off the land without any of those supplements?
We did the first program in 2013 on the Webb and Duval property. And keep in mind, that's where we started with the natives. We saw results right away. The natives, and I don't remember rainfall amounts or anything back in the day, but I know that when we did it in 2013, we were in a severe drought. The brush was transparent. I mean, literally, there was not a leaf on any of it. It was nothing but dry twigs. I mean, you could see through that brush a good ways. That's how horribly bad and dry it was. And when we did it, I said, I'm doing this at the worst time possible. But it ended up being the best time possible now that I reflect back and look at it, to be honest with you. But once we started finally, the drought broke and we started getting some rains, the natives took off right away. That wasn't an issue. And like I said, we always had something green at different times of the year, and that was really exciting. The problem there was I was still trying to run the same number of cattle. We downsized a bit, we destocked, but native grasses just don't have enough leaf matter. So therefore they don't produce enough forage pounds per acre like buffalo grass does, for example. And that's why now we're letting the natives do what they're going to do in the midst of that brush, even the one we were projected to treat with Spike 20P. On the other property, we did start there with nothing but buffalo. And, once again, you see signs of grass coming up, but is it a sticker burr? Is it a native? Is it the buffalo? It's still too small to tell. Hasn't developed the seed head. We had a lot of issues with a pepperweed, and for a while there, we thought that was going to be a real big problem for us. But we just gave it time. We just said we've done what we can do right now, short of trying to go all crazy and trying to chase our own tail like a dog. We kind of had to step back and say, okay, we've done everything we could. We did it the way we were supposed to. Now we got to let nature do its thing, and we had to step off and step back, and that's where I've learned the most is the pepperweed was strong at the beginning, but with time it started phasing out. I had hog issues. I was worried about that as well, and nature just started correcting itself once we gave it a platform and we kick-started it by these mechanical practices. Honestly, I can say at some point after that we just kind of sat back, were patient, waited for things to happen, not knowing what was going to happen or when, but it's happened. And that's that's why I said earlier, patience is a very big thing that we all need to develop more, especially in the ranching industry in regards to wanting to see our pastures in better health, wanting to see more grass and all those things. We got to learn how to be patient. And I know it's a hard thing to do.
All right, so we have a few moments left. I'll let, if anybody wants to come off of mute and ask any questions, or feel free to actually write them down in the chat too. Anybody have any questions?
You know, and if anybody ever wants to come, other than, you know, these wonderful opportunities to speak and interview and what have you, you all have my phone number and my name. Feel free to give me a call, honestly, about anything. And you know, I'm here to listen. I'm here to try to help in whatever way I can. And I'm also going to learn from you all, whether you believe it or not, or understand that. But the other thing is that, you know, if anybody, depending where y'all live, or if you're willing to make a trip, we'd love to have you all come pay us a visit at either property or both. I can give you all a full day, a tour, and we can, you know, look at different things, whatever your heart desires. We're here for that opportunity for you all as well. We love doing that.
Yeah, we're actually going to hear more from Servando, as well as our other two Safe to Fail trial participants, Lori Solella and Jeremiah Eubanks, next Thursday at this same time, same bat channel. There's a QR code on the screen right now if you want to register for that event. And then also there's the link in the chat to register for that event. He'll go more into the Safe to Fail trial, what he learned, what his experiences were, what, you know, he would, if he would do it again, which he did, spoiler alert. It looks like Peggy has another question too. How are you going to utilize what you learned from the Safe to Fail trial?
Well, the plan there is to figure out now logistically, how can I continue to do what we did on that 30 by 30 area with, you know, some kind of a mobile water system to kind of keep us moving as we move those animals, and electric fence to be able to do that. I don't foresee myself doing that, or even economically feasible doing it with barbed wire. So I have done some small little R&D type things on the property with electric fence. Still have some things to learn on that. I loved what I saw when I did that trial with electric fence. Of course, they weren't that small of a paddock. It was somewhat larger. But what ended up really affecting me was, I guess, two things. One was the deer. It was during deer that they were just flying through those electric wire cords and knocking stuff down. But I think I can't blame it so much on the deer. I have to blame that on myself. And it was my laziness in taking it down, rolling it up. And, you know, I kind of left it there because I'm used to barbed wire fencing. You just build it and leave it there. Well, that's not the case with electric fence, I found out. So those are the two things: mobile water unit and electric fence system that will help me continue to move the cattle forward in small areas, and knowing what the benefits will translate to at the end of the day with time.
All right. Well, thank you, Servando. Like I said earlier, you are a true champion and mentor for all the people around you, especially down there in South Texas. And look forward to continue to working with you. And thanks for sharing with us today.
Absolutely. Thank you all for the opportunity and for everything you all have done in helping me as well.